Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome our guest today, Aaron Day. He is an entrepreneur, investor, advisor. He's even the author of a best selling book against CBDCs, and most importantly, a very strong advocate for privacy and liberty. And he's also the chairman, CEO of the Daylight Freedom Foundation, which aims to empower individuals through decentralized financial systems. And I understand he's even a presidential candidate, which I guess we'll talk about in a bit. And Aaron was really gracious enough to come on after our community members told us that we should reach out to him, and we're so happy to have you on. And welcome, Aaron. And do tell us about yourself and the Daylight Freedom Foundation. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me on. I guess I'll give you the quick overview of how I got here. A lot of people talk about when were you first radicalized, and I actually like to give my bio now in terms of how many times I was radicalized. Kind of three different components of this. The first was I'm the kind of guy that in high school started an Ayn Rand objectivist club, so that's kind of gives you a sense where I started. So I didn't have a big move to liberty. I kind of started with liberty, but nevertheless was still radicalized a few times. I dropped out of Duke and started my first company in 1995. And after spending time meeting with 150 different VCs in Wall Street, realized I think my first radicalization was that venture capital is not capitalism, and Wall Street is completely crony. So that was my first experience. And so I sold my company in 2001, then started another company in the healthcare space, which was profitable. We had clients in 43 states. And it was really having an impact and helping employees improve their health and employers reduce cost. And it was destroyed by Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and Attorney General Eric Holder. Although in this instance, we weren't targeted. Nobody was going after my company or me in particular. I was just collateral damage from a whole variety of different bad policies.
Right.
So my second radicalization was kind of my worldview was, Wall Street and venture capital it's cronyism. Government is incompetent. Okay. So that was kind of phase two. So then I became a liberty activist. I moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, which is an effort to get 20,000 libertarians to the state, which already has the live free or die motto, and to make it the freest place on earth. And so became the chair of that organization. Ran a bunch of political organizations, helped to get, my wife also ran a liberty organization as well. And we helped to get over 200 people elected over the years at the state level. And then I even ran for office myself, which is a whole other separate conversation. But the conclusion that I came to was there is no way to vote our way out of this. Politics is not the answer. And my third radicalization came when, as part of moving and becoming part of the Free State Project, I learned about Bitcoin. And this was in 2012. And I learned about Bitcoin from Ian Freeman and Roger Ver.
Yeah.
And so started using Bitcoin directly as cash. In fact, New Hampshire was the highest, had the highest usage per capita of crypto anywhere in the world. I mean, there were numerous stores and restaurants where you could use it directly, going all the way back as far as 2012. So I used it as cash. Used it even for political activism. And then we saw what happened in 2017 in the whole block size war, and then it became unusable.
Yeah.
When I exited politics, my goal was to move into non-political solutions. And what I liked about Bitcoin and blockchain technology in general was the idea, at least what we thought the idea behind Bitcoin was, peer-to-peer cash, where you get rid of banks and you get rid of third parties, and you have people just interacting voluntarily amongst themselves with all these other layers. Well, money is only one type of asset. In fact, it represents only 5% of global assets. You have stocks, bonds, real estate, every other thing that you can imagine is an asset. And it could also, you could apply this technology in the same way and get rid of third parties. And so I've spent a lot of time focusing on tokenization, and that was the path I was going down. And then COVID happened, and then all of a sudden my friends were being targeted by the federal government. So Ian Freeman, my wife and I went to his sentencing hearing, sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for selling Bitcoin. Jeremy Kaufman, another free stater who started Library, his business was targeted by the SEC. And I started to look into, well, why are they going after crypto? And in particular, Liberty crypto.
Yeah.
And that's when I did a real deep dive on CBDCs and found that we went from this situation where in 2020, there were 35 countries just researching CBDCs.
Yeah.
And now, fast forward to where we are today, 134 countries representing 98% of the global GDP are at various stages. 11 countries have rolled out a CBDC. And so I realized that, okay, they're cracking down on crypto because they need to remove the competition so that they can roll out CBDCs. And so
Mhm.
once I understood that, I wrote a book called The Final Countdown, and I ran for president. I'm no longer running for president, but I ran for president specifically to raise awareness on this issue because to me, this is the single biggest threat to human liberty. Once your money can be programmed, tracked, and censored, it's essentially the end of free will because your behavior can be completely controlled and manipulated through this digital programmable money. And so I had some success talking to some other politicians about CBDCs, although once again, there's no political solution there either. And then I became a fellow at the Brownstone Institute, and then also started at the same time. So I'm doing both of these things, the Daylight Freedom Foundation, and what we're focusing on with the Daylight Freedom Foundation is doing workshops all across the country and now expanding internationally, where I teach people about the threat of CBDCs, but more importantly, I give them the solution, which is I teach them how to live on crypto, gold, and silver like I do as the alternative to CBDCs. And so that's what I spend 100% of my time on now.
Amazing. Um, I have a few questions. So, like, we know the purported benefits of CBDCs, and obviously, we think it's some sort of like agenda. And I know Americans, especially, they always talk about their right to bear arms, and I'm like, well, if you can be just cut off from your money at any time, what's the point of being able to bear arms, right? This is like your literal livelihood, right? And I'm just wondering, is there any sort of like, because even like some of the people within the system, they're like, why do we need a CBDC? Is there like, let's say if we look at it from a positive point of view, are there any positives of a CBDC at all? Or at least, what are the arguments have you heard that are pro CBDC?
Well, there's the arguments that they give, but then what I've done is I've studied all of the different CBDC pilots that are going on all over the world. And then I've studied our existing system, specifically focusing on the United States. And the conclusion that I've come to, and I've written an article about this that's on Zero Hedge, is that we already have a CBDC.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, our money and part of this to me is now definitional. So what is the definition of a CBDC? Well,
Yeah.
different people have different definitions, but I'm just going to look at the words themselves. A central bank digital currency. Well, how is money created in the United States? The federal government issues an IOU to the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank.
Mhm.
And then the Federal Reserve creates money out of thin air in an Oracle database.
Yeah.
And that's what the government writes all of its checks out of. That is a central bank digital currency. And so what I've concluded with this, because I've tried to study what the politicians are saying and what the various bills say. And I'm saying now that we already have a CBDC, and it's now just about what level of tyranny do we have with the CBDC. And it's already actually pretty bad. So what most people, and by the way, half of Americans have never even heard of CBDC. So this is still kind of an issue that we struggle with. But most of the things that people worry about with the CBDC, we already have today. So it's already digital. It's already programmable. We have health savings accounts, flexible spending accounts, which are tied to a bank. I mean, it's banks that issue these cards, which basically you can only use for health-related purposes at specific times and at specific retailers. The money's already programmable. And as far as surveillance goes, and this is the biggest travesty, politicians on both sides will say, well, we have to protect the American people from, financial surveillance. Well, I've identified 13 different programs that are already going on for surveilling our transactions, including bulk NSA data collection, the IRS now working with banks to track our transactions, and something that we have called a national security letter, where they can come in, shut down your bank account, and you can't talk to anybody about it, including a lawyer. And so those are just 3 of the 13. So the conclusion that I have is we already have a CBDC. Now we're just negotiating the tyranny. What the other side will say is it's about financial inclusion and convenience, which those are their 2 main talking points. And when I look at those, Well, it isn't about financial inclusion, because there are millions of Americans that don't use the banking system now and use cash. They will not be eligible to use a CBDC. So I don't even know what the logic behind that, or what the argument behind that is, because all of a sudden you have a CBDC. That doesn't mean the people that are currently unbanked will be banked. There's no correlation between those ideas. And as far as convenience is concerned, I mean, again, we already have a CBDC. So what they really mean, and what they're really shooting towards, the worst case full tyranny perspective, is you get rid of cash, you get rid of crypto,
Hmm.
and you basically tie the digital currency to a social credit score system, where your money can be shut off and completely controlled from the top down, based on whatever behavior they want to drive through the social credit system. That is what they're shooting for. So that's kind of where I've come out on this. I don't know what the advantages are. There aren't any. And even the head of the Bank of International Settlements himself
Yeah.
has said it's all about surveillance. So there are enough video clips of these people talking about their true intentions. Their true intentions are control. Their true intentions have nothing to do with anything that is of interest to empowering individuals or freedom.
And I think in one of your previous interviews that I watched, you actually like highlighted that a lot of the like one of the like a lot of the strong contributors to Bitcoin now are contributing to, I think, something called Project Hamilton, which is some study into a CBDC and all of that. And I did notice that they had some ideas like, oh yeah, for a CBDC to work, it should have some sort of privacy, right? And it wasn't really clear. They did discuss, I think, a little bit about some privacy mechanisms, but I wouldn't pretend to be an expert on that. But like, I just wondered, like, are you familiar with that, and what are your thoughts on this particular point? Yeah.
So that's a great point. So it can get worse, and so the current system right now, the Federal Reserve can do about 1,000 transactions per second using their Oracle database, and now we have FedNow, which is an evolution in that.
Yeah.
And they are working on the technology behind, and I'll call it enhanced CBDCs. And I've written quite a bit about this as well. And what's really interesting is when I read Roger's book Hijacking Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and then talked to him about it, and then there's kind of an interesting thing that happened here, which is that the Bitcoin Foundation was funding the development of Bitcoin for
Hmm.
quite some period of time. I don't know how long it was, but it basically stopped around 2015, and then MIT came in, and took over. And basically, that's when this narrative began to shift from Bitcoin being peer-to-peer digital cash that people use for day-to-day transactions to digital gold. Well, it
Yeah.
turns out that same MIT group that basically cemented Bitcoin as being slow and expensive and not for use for day-to-day transactions funded all 3 US CBDC pilots.
Mm.
Now, the 3 pilots there's one, Project Hamilton, and Project Hamilton is the retail CBDC. So that's what most people would be familiar with. It's the
Right.
replacement for cash. And it has a Bitcoin core developer as a co-author of the white paper.
Right.
And it's the same developer whose name eludes me right now, but he actually worked on SegWit and Lightning.
Hmm.
Right. So, I
Hmm.
mean, there's, and it's all there. I mean, there's no conspiracy theory. You can go to the Project Hamilton site
Yep.
and you can look at the white paper, and the name is there. And so this CBDC can do 1.8 million now transactions per second. And I've looked at it, and then I've talked to another developer from the Federal Reserve Bank, who used to be at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, who said, I mean, they've talked about privacy, but they certainly have not built it into the actual thing that they've designed
Yeah.
and tested. So it's pretty far along. In fact, what you read online uh, is the pilot up to 2022, but they didn't stop. It's
Yeah.
still ongoing. The project is still ongoing. And so that's one of the pilots, and there are 2 others. The worst one of them all is called Regulated Liability Network. This is basically one platform, one ledger that will track all CBDCs and then all other tokenized assets on one platform. And so, I mean, I wrote an article. It's like you may own nothing sooner than you think, meaning that they're basically going to take all of our stocks, all of our bonds, all of our other assets, and they're going to tokenize them in the same way they're tokenizing money, CBDCs, where it can be programmed and tracked and censored
These.
centrally.
Hmm.
And so this regulated liability network, which is a MIT project with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and a whole bunch of other players, has the technology that they're using. The chief platform engineer for that is Mike Hearn, one of the early Bitcoin
Yep.
core developers. So literally, and the reason that I bring this up is that a lot of libertarians have this idea that we'll never have these enhanced CBDCs because it's a government project. These are not government projects. These are the largest, most well-funded banks in the world, funding the smartest developers in the world through MIT and with participation from core developers from Bitcoin. So this is real technology and is nothing that we should, discount at all, because they are putting a lot of money, resources, and attention behind it. But at the end, you'll have regulated liability network and CBDCs. So all of our assets and money will be on one ledger, but different countries are developing their own regulated liability networks. Europe is developing one, Japan is developing one, and they're developing them in a way to interoperate. So at the end of this, there's one global database with all CBDCs and global assets in one place, which is a frightening thought if you are liberty minded.
Why do you call it, like, I noticed the term they use, regulated liability network? If you could expand a little bit about that. Yeah.
Well, I think they use that language because, I mean, that's what fiat currency is, right?
All
It's a
right.
it's a
Yeah.
it's a liability. So, and when you read through the white paper, they're very anti-crypto. It's
Yes.
explicitly anti-crypto, and they actually have quotes from people from large financial institutions talking about how important it is that we preserve the central bank, liability system, essentially. So
Mm,
it is so they're basically regulating all of these central bank liabilities on one platform and then tying those to other assets, and they want to strip everything out. Strip off everything else,
yeah.
or if not strip it off entirely, make it so that you have to register your Bitcoin, register your other cryptocurrencies through their system, or you won't be able to use them, or it will be illegal. So and almost no one I've heard of, and I've been talking about this now for 2 years, has heard of regulated liability network. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done tons of interviews, and I mean, again, it's a boring name. I mean, if you see a regulated liability network, it's like, okay, yeah, that doesn't seem like a threat, but it also seems too boring to even read. And then once you actually read what's in the white paper, you realize that it's horrifying. It is truly the way they're going to strip us of all of our assets through a process. And I'll take one step back on this. How we even got here is we've been signing these click wrap agreements for decades, right? So every time we get a new computer, whether it's, I think the Amazon terms of service is 12,000 words. The Wells Fargo online banking agreement is 30 pages. The, Microsoft user license agreement is 70 pages, right? We sign these things all day
Yeah.
long. The average person signs 150 to 400 click wrap agreements every year. And if you were to actually read all of the contracts, it would take you an hour a day, every day, 365 days a year. So of course, nobody does it. And so we've given away all kinds of rights. I mean, not to our data, to our privacy. I mean, the most extreme case now is there's a lawsuit going on where there was a restaurant that had leased space from Disney, and a doctor died of food
Mhm.
poisoning at the restaurant. And Disney is trying to use the Disney Plus online service agreement to get out of liability for the
Wow.
doctor.
Amazing.
So we've given this away, and we've given this away with our stocks and our bonds and everything else. And so once they move to this digital system, it turns out the legal work has already been done for us to transfer all of our assets to other third parties. The technology will just facilitate that in a way that is it can be done basically with a click of a button. So that's what's worrisome about all of this. It's not even just money. It goes on to all other assets.
Yeah. I mean, just to share a little bit about my experience. I mean, I come from Malaysia, and even though I don't think we have a CBDC, maybe we do, but like just this year, we have something called e-invoicing, which sounds very innocuous, but it basically reports every single commercial transaction direct to our Inland Revenue Board. Basically, like, even a coffee shop transaction and all of this. And this is from a government that has leaked our data many times, and no one seems to be concerned about it. I'm frankly so scared about it. And you know, I hoped like, oh, at least cash is going to be our last bastion. But more and more, you see shops saying like, this is a cashless only, this is cashless only, and I'm like, wow, now we are actually like entering into like really surveillance territory. And why I got into crypto was actually quite similar to you. I ran a VPN business back in 2007, and it's totally legal, but the banks and all these people were like, oh, we're not comfortable with your business, and they shut off my facilities to accept credit cards, my banking payment processes all cut me off. And I was like, what the heck, so I think of course, I think yours was probably much more serious, but I think this is how we were radicalized together in around the same time, 2012 as well. So we share
Yep.
quite a similar journey. So quite nice to hear that. Now, I guess what I would like to also to talk about is that, you I mean, I'm not very a big believer of Trump, but he has been talking about his support of crypto, that he will fight against the CBDC, that he would, have a strategic reserve of Bitcoin. I mean, of course, like politicians say politician things, but I'm curious to hear what your take is on that. Right, especially since he comes from a place where just a few years ago he's like, oh, Bitcoin is crap, and it threatens the US dollar. And this pivot is quite, I guess it's quite typical of Trump, but I want to hear your thoughts about it.
Well, so part of why he came out against CBDCs is because of my interactions with Vivek Ramaswamy. So Vivek read my book. So I'm in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is a critical state for the presidential primaries. And I'd actually run for office before, and I got 17,000 votes here, which is actually a huge amount. It's for a presidential primary, it actually can make the difference between third or second or whatever. And I was running for president. So Vivek read my book. He actually did read it, and we talked about it a few times. And after the Iowa caucuses, Vivek dropped out, and Trump was in a contested race.
Right.
And against Haley. And so I think Vivek basically said to Trump, because Trump's given him credit for it, but basically the night before the primary, he said, look, if you need some extra votes here, this is a strong libertarian group. And of course, he already knew that. I mean, the chair of Vivek's campaign was Bruce Fenton, who was previously. So it wasn't just me. There's a lot of people hounding this, but there was no one hounding the CBDC issue more than I was. And so Trump came out and said he was against it. But when you listen to what he says, it's unclear that he even knows what it is. And as I said earlier, we already have a CBDC. Yeah. Now let's fast forward to the policies on this. So I've looked at the bills that have gone through the House, and a lot of people get excited about Cynthia Lummis, this senator from Wyoming, because she has laser eyes and everything else. These bills, no one reads these bills. Just like I said with these click wrap agreements, that somebody did a study where they found 74% of people would sign a click wrap agreement that said you're going to give your firstborn child to the government and all of your data to the NSA, and nobody read the agreement. So 74% just said, okay, I'm going to sign it. Well, this is what goes on with these crypto bills. I'm convinced if somebody wrote the USA Blockchain Patriotism Act and put in the bill, we're going to round up everybody that has self-custody crypto and execute them in front of a firing squad, that most people would cheer it on, because again, nobody reads it. Cynthia Lummis is anti-privacy. She has been explicitly anti-privacy in her comments, and her bills and her legislation that she's put forward give more control over crypto to banks and impose more reporting requirements. So when Trump says he's going to put in place rules of the road in the first 100 days, it's obviously going to be modeled predominantly probably work of Lummis. And so then this Bitcoin strategic reserve. So if Nancy Pelosi held a press conference today and said, we're going to use $1 trillion worth of taxpayer money to buy my stock portfolio and hold it for 20 years, most people would be irate, right? Well, so this is what Lummis promoted and actually drafted a bill, and she owns $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. It's now, of course, we could talk separately. Bitcoin is not the answer. Hijacked Bitcoin is now a 7 transaction per second surveillance coin and a diversion. So it's not going to help with the national debt. And so I believe Trump is signing on to this because there's money in it, because there are Bitcoin maxis that have given a lot of money to his campaign. So I don't believe, I think the strategic reserve is a horrible idea. I think it's rank cronyism. And I think that the policies that we're going to get are going to be anti-privacy and are actually going to give more control to the banks. And I will say, and when in this CBDC tyranny index that I put together, there are a whole bunch of different categories. Here's the Republican way of saying they're not doing a central bank digital currency. They'll give complete control to commercial banks to issue stablecoins. One of the things that Loomis has proposed is an outright ban on algorithmic stablecoins. And then they put in place criteria that basically make it so that Tether and others will not be able to issue stablecoins, that the only entities that will be able to issue stablecoins are large commercial banks. Well, so a stablecoin issued by JP Morgan Chase is programmable digital money. And the fact that it's not issued by the Federal Reserve is a difference without a distinction, because who owns the Federal Reserve? The banks own the Federal Reserve. So you still get all of the programmability, all of the surveillance, and everything that you don't like. The only difference is that you have the commercial banks issuing it instead of the central bank, which to me is not an important differentiator. And I will say something else. With all of the CBDCs that have been implemented, a lot of people have this idea that banks will go away and that you will just deal with the central bank. And that's not the case. There's no CBDC that's been implemented like that, and there aren't any that are being contemplated like that. You're not going to get a mortgage through the Federal Reserve. It's always a two-tier system anyway. But this is the Republicans' way of saying, well, we're pro-industry because we're pro-bank. So you're going to be able to custody your crypto through the banks. You're going to be able to use commercial bank-issued stablecoins. Well, that doesn't help anybody in any way, shape, or form. And I would add, it adds to the tyranny index that I've created for CBDCs. So that is the Republican take. There is not a single bill that I have seen that protects privacy or promotes privacy. And there is bipartisan support on using this pretext of money laundering and drug trafficking to crack down on privacy coins. And it's a joke, because I'm sure your audience is already aware that the entities that are involved in doing those activities are typically governments themselves, and they use fiat currencies. So this is
banks.
And banks. This is all about control. So again, we can't vote our way out. The biggest concern that I have is now there's a sense of complacency, because Trump said he was going to veto CBDCs. Now people aren't even looking at CBDCs. They're not understanding or examining the current system that we have, or even what bills are being proposed. So it's actually been damaging in some ways. Again, 2030, Agenda 2030 is what's coming. Technocracy is what's coming. In some ways, it would be better if people realized, if Harris wins, more people will realize that we need to start focusing more attention on solutions outside of government. I'm certainly not advocating for that. I'm not voting at all, but I am horrified, because I've seen it in the last 60 to 90 days, people become complacent about CBDCs. And I think that's deadly. And now what has Trump done? He's doing an ICO for
from quite shady people. I understand.
This is not, we're going back to 2017 and
ICO era.
We're going back to the ICO. And look, ICO should be legal. People should be able to do whatever they want. Here's the problem that I have. The problem that I have is all of the central banks, all of the large banks, they're building systems that can do 1.8 million transactions per second, and that will tokenize all of our assets globally and put them on one platform. What are we doing in the crypto space? We're doing meme coins and we're doing NFTs. And again, people should be able to do whatever they want. But one challenge that I come up against is, I'll say to people, because I'm wearing this, my Xano, the revolution will be tokenized. Tokenization is going to happen whether we like it or not. Tokenization is going to happen because all of global commerce runs on centralized databases. Money itself is a centralized database. And centralized databases can be hacked, and they can be changed and manipulated. And we are dealing with trillions of dollars a year in financial loss due to centralized databases. It's not a secure way of doing things. Tokenization is a logical step forward that provides greater security to the underlying system that we have. With that said, tokenization could either be a tyranny-based solution or a freedom-based solution? Well, the people that should be working on the freedom-based solutions are selling hot dog token and are selling NFTs, and the people that are focused on the tyranny side are aggregating all of our real-world assets and putting it onto this dystopian platform. So that's the challenge that we have. We can still defeat this, but we actually have to acknowledge what's going on and dedicate some attention towards building alternative solutions to what they're building.
Yeah, I actually really agree, especially like, for someone, of course I'm not as OG as someone like Roger Ver, but when we got it in 2012, back then the energy and the ethos of cryptocurrency was a lot different. Was this obviously there's that speculation bit, but it was more about like, wow, this thing is like amazing. We can transact with people, we can pay things in real world, we can do this thing like cross borderless. It was like a true movement, right? You felt part of something bigger, right? And then of course the ICO era came, and then it got progressively worse and worse and worse. And I agree with you. People should be able to create NFTs, people should be able to create meme coins, but it's also very sad to see that like nowadays, even if you talk to like the crypto VCs, like privacy coins, payments, like that's so like 2016. Now we're all about the memes, the layer twos, the real world assets, the DPIN stuff. And I find it quite sad because all the news is all like having attention on these meme coins. And you're like, well, what actually are we building? And I've been like, speaking to like several people in my industry who have been around for a while. I'm like, hey, anything exciting that you have seen that is being built recently? And they're like, no, this whole cycle has been about meme coins, right? And I find that like horribly, I mean, I might sound like a sour grape, but I mean, I'm a fan of meme coins. I'm just feel like it's also a distraction of the true purpose of what cryptocurrency was supposed to be all about, right? And I'm also like very sad that people's we were promised to say, oh, Lightning Network's going to solve everything, and we know today like hardly anybody uses Lightning, and it's not the solution to everything. Which I was very kind of also sad to see, like Bitcoin Cash was kind of like fragmented and killed from the inside as well, from the outside as well. And it was like it's quite, I mean, it's quite a dystopian future, as you say. And I think one of the things that I'm also very curious about, like like we've been building privacy coins. You're a huge supporter of privacy coins. Right in your profile, it's like there's a list of privacy coins, right? And well, I guess maybe we start with something simple, and like how do you see like privacy coins like solving this issue? Like versus other types of coins, right? Yeah.
So, and I wasn't this privacy coin maximalist even 120 days ago. So, I mean, I've been living on, as I said, since 2019 on
Yeah.
crypto, and I primarily used a variety of things, but Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin, in a whole variety of like a handful of different coins that have low transaction fees. And it wasn't until a couple of things happened. It was, well, one, I saw the two people that introduced me to. So I learned about Bitcoin from Ian and Roger, and so when Ian had his sensing hearing, I actually sent a message to Roger. I said, "Hey, will you retweet this? We want to get a lot of people there." And he did, and it was packed, and not just because of that. I mean, certainly people are already going to show up anyway, but there was an overfill courtroom of people wanting to sit in on Ian's sensing hearing. And then 7.5 months later, Roger
Yeah.
is arrested in Spain, and a lot of this is related to Executive Order 14067, which President Biden has put into place, which does two things. It authorizes the U.S. to explore CBDC and use a whole of government approach, to cracking down on crypto, which they're doing. Treasury Department,
Yeah.
IRS, Department of Defense,
Chancellor.
DOJ, and everything else. And so looking at that crackdown and then looking at how chain analysis is being used. I just did a workshop last weekend, and I actually told people that Bitcoin's not the answer. And I walked through briefly the hijacking of Bitcoin and then everything else. And then I asked how many people were aware of what I had just said. And there were
Yeah.
only like 2 people in the audience, and they were aware of it because they heard it from me. So nobody is aware of the fact that your Bitcoin and your Ethereum can be tracked, and that they
Yep.
are doing this. And they did this with Ross Ulbricht, and they did this with Ian, and they did it
Yep.
with Roger, and they're going to do it with everybody. And so, in looking at, and with my whole focus being, okay, what are the alternatives to a CBDC? Well, an alternative to the CBDC is not a transparent blockchain where everything can be tracked, and where basically the money can be, the Bitcoin itself could be put on a whitelist or a blacklist, basically
Yes.
destroying the fungibility of money itself.
Mhm.
And so then I'm like, okay, well, we really need to move off of this entirely. The only way that we're going to stop CBDCs is to have something that we can use peer to peer that can't be tracked like that. And so that's really how this whole thing has come about. And then when I learned about regulated liability network and the fact that they're doing this with non-monetary assets as well, stocks, bonds, and everything else, then I'm like, okay, we need to be able to have privacy tokens. I spent a lot
Right.
of time working with Ravencoin, and I've tokenized and traded a lot of assets, and I love Ravencoin as a project, but
Yep.
it's transparent. It has the
Yes.
same
Correct.
issues.
Mhm.
And so now I'm like, no, we need to be able to tokenize and trade anything privately. That's our only way out of this. And so now it's a passion. And in fact, my workshop, um, there isn't a single slide that is the same as the workshop that I did 90 days ago. Everything in the presentation is completely rewritten from the ground up, and with a new emphasis on privacy.
Very interesting. So I mean, like, that means, like, I think one of the things, like, talking about, like, I think, one of the reasons also why you're so a big supporter of Zano is, like, it's support, like, you believe that it's not just about privacy coins, but kind of like, well, the governments are doing this, the banks are doing this, they're tokenizing everything. Obviously, we as the counter movement should be also tokenizing everything, but with privacy, right? And I mean, that's also a vision that I believe in. That, and Firo is also developing Spark assets as well, which allows, like, indistinguishable, like, you don't really know what you're transacting, stable coin, meme coin, or whatnot. Very similar to Zano, obviously with a different privacy protocol. And I was like wondering, like, I guess my concern, right? Because especially as a project steward of a privacy project, we are increasingly losing the connection to the fiat world, right? And I mean, I mean, maybe I'm not like a maximalist in that sense, but I always feel that it is very highly unlikely for, let's say, crypto to exist without fiat, in the sense that I don't see fiat going away. I mean, we would like to see fiat going away, but I don't know. I don't even see that happening in my lifetime, right? And therefore, I'm trying to build for a future where both, like, yes, privacy coins will exist, crypto will exist, and then you also have fiat, and there is this kind of like seamless transfer between fiat and crypto, right? And now, obviously, now, I'm starting to see, like, governments and regulations all cracking down, particularly on crypto, but even worse on privacy crypto. Like, we're listed on Binance, which has like several hundred million users with like a large user base. But now it's like they're kind of like saying they place a monitoring tag on us because we are a privacy coin. And they have said that, why did they place it on us? Is because there's pressure from Europe because of their new laws. There's pressure from the US Department of Justice as part of their settlement for this. Now, we've also seen, like, Monero being delisted from a bunch of very large exchanges. They also just lost Kraken in Europe. And of course, the Monero maxis will be like, yeah, great, we don't want centralized exchanges. And then I'm like, well, okay, if you remove all the centralized exchanges today, what do you have? You don't have anything. So at the same time, while yes, I know that we should view centralized exchanges with some skepticism, not your keys, not your coins, they will bow into regulation. But at the same time, how do you make privacy coins? How do you sell privacy coins if all those, like, gateways are being cut off? And like, that is like kind of quite a scary proposition for me. And I was wondering, because you say that you live totally off crypto, a lot of this, like, conversion gateways, they all rely on centralized back ends, Bitrefill, and they all use centralized exchange back ends. What happens when all of that goes away? Are privacy coins useful still then? Kind of want to hear your take on that. Yeah.
So just as there's a CBDC tyranny index, right? Like they didn't start out with a global one world digital currency that's backed by energy credits tied to a UN social credit score. They're
Yeah.
working in phases. And I've created a freedom index as well. And so we're not going to get to, I mean, so what the end goal that we want is everybody's using privacy coins peer to peer without any touching fiat at all. It's literally just outside of the system, but we're certainly not going to start there. And
Yeah.
it's kind of a race. It's a race of them, climbing up the tyranny index and then us trying to climb up the freedom index. And myself, living on crypto, I mean, in New Hampshire, there are places that I can go and use crypto directly. I mean, I can go to farms, I can buy food, I can do a whole bunch of things that most people can't based on where they live. And that's just one of the reasons that the Free State Project is great.
Yeah.
But whenever I travel, I'm still using gift cards, or I'm going to use a debit card, or,
Hmm.
I'm going to use something like Spritz Finance to pay my bills, which is, there's no privacy there. I mean, you have to assume everything that you're doing through these
Yeah.
things is tracked. So, um, we're going to have to innovate, but there are some innovations that are coming. I mean, there are some technologies. There's this confidential layer technology that's going to be able to convert um, Bitcoin and Ethereum and Bitcoin, other cryptos to privacy coins. So I think that these are technologies that kind of work outside of the centralized exchange system. I believe we can innovate around it. And I believe the innovations are actually being developed and in some cases have been developed. They just haven't been deployed. So I believe it's going to be possible to use some of these technologies, but it has to be usable and user friendly. And I think
Yeah.
that's being worked on. But it's a race, right? Like there's no magic bullet here. We know what we're up against, and we know what we've got to do. And the challenge is, I don't expect Xano to be listed on any major exchange in the U.S. But let's look at the exchanges themselves. There are like 4 major exchanges left in the US. They're
Yeah.
all being sued by the SEC.
Yeah.
And even Coinbase is
Yeah.
working with the IRS, and they're giving
Yeah.
up your transaction data. So to me, so what happens now if I'm trying to onboard somebody to a privacy coin? It's, well, all right, yeah, you have to use an exchange. I mean, I guess you could use Kraken and buy Monero, but I wouldn't even do that. I'd buy a stable coin and then use a non KYC solution to
Yeah.
convert to the stable coin to Monero, so that way there's not a clear record of the fact that you even bought Monero on Kraken. Because if you bought Monero on Kraken, then you're on a list, right?
Yeah.
And now they're going to come after you. And, oh, you didn't report your Monero on your IRS form, which of course now they're going to be requiring you to report your self-custody crypto holdings and everything else. And so it's just a matter of finding the workarounds. But the exchanges are more difficult. It's harder to buy crypto today than it was 10 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
and when I onboard new people, one of the things that's interesting is, so have you heard of this great taking?
No, I've not.
This is a phenomenal concept. Well, this is horrifying, actually. This guy, David Webb, wrote a book called The Great Taking. He was in private equity on Wall Street, and he basically discovered that starting in 1994, there were changes made to the UCC codes in all 50 states that essentially make it so that the next time there's a financial collapse, your stocks, bonds, and 401ks, you will not own those assets. They will go to the secured creditors. And in fact,
Oh.
with a preference to the 4 largest banks, there's actually a special carve out for the largest financial institutions. So this has already been put in place contractually. So a lot of people are starting to become aware of this. David Webb, Chris Martenson, others have been talking about this, and I've been talking about this. And so there are a lot of older people, there are a lot of boomers that have all their money in 401ks. And once they realize this, they try to, diversify. And some of them want to diversify into privacy coins as an
Yeah.
example. Well, the process for that is, you sell part of your 401k, you have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to get a check. Then you get that check, you deposit it in a bank, you wait for it to clear, you set up a Coinbase account, which takes however long to do the KYC. And then if you
Yeah.
don't wire the money, you have to wait 5 days. So literally, from the time somebody says, I'm going to sell some of my 401k, to going through all of the steps necessary to get a privacy coin, it takes 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And that is not going to get any shorter. There's nothing on the horizon that's going to make that any easier, particularly as more people learn about the great taking. You're going to have more people wanting to exit the stock market. And I think I
Yeah.
saw today Hong Kong was down like 10%. I mean, it's only a matter of time before all of these things blow up. And when they blow up, the average person's not going to be able to get their assets out. And then they're going to find they don't even own the assets. And this is the world that we're in. So I just try to help people however I can with whatever mechanisms, but those mechanisms change. Even uh, non KYC swapping services exist. That
Yeah.
changes. Like there's not a lot of stability here. So I've actually created a page on my Daylight Freedom website where I keep people up to date as to what it is that I'm doing in real time. Because otherwise, I mean, I did write some things in my book, and I tell people now, don't read the chapter in my book on crypto because it's completely out of date. I don't do any of that anymore. Just go to this website, and then, because since I live on this stuff, I have to keep it up to date, right? I
Yeah.
have to figure out how this stuff is going to work. And it's just an education process. But I will say that there are two things that I think can happen to really accelerate all of this. One, and this is probably the most disappointing part. You mentioned, the excitement of first using Bitcoin. And when I first used Bitcoin, I'm like, wow, this is better, faster, cheaper money.
Yeah.
Even when I did my first e-commerce company, I had issues with payment processing, and I had to put up letters of credit just to be able to sell retail goods. And it was ridiculous. And I'm like, this is better, faster, cheaper money. But that was 2012. Since then, Venmo and Zelle and Apple Pay and Google Pay and soon X Payments and FedNow have been developed. And so the actual tech is easier to use through traditional fiat. It's actually a better offering. So we have to compete on the actual user experience itself, which has been a challenge for crypto. So I've been using Cake Wallet recently because it has Monero, it's adding Xano, but it has multiple cryptos. It has exchange services built in with multiple different swapping services. You can use CakePay. Something like that is critical. But the real missing piece, and if I have to, I'll build it myself, and I'm actually working on that now, is we need a point of sale system. The big challenge right now is how do you onboard merchants to take crypto? Because in the past, it was usually somebody was really excited about their one coin, and then they went to a retailer, and the owner's like, oh, this is great. I'll take this. They download a personal wallet, and then their name gets added to a map, right? And then it turns out nobody else uses it. And so somebody else goes there, and it's like, what? Well, I don't remember
Oh
that,
no.
or I forgot about that. There have been some point of sale systems that have been developed, but if they're run through a central company, then that's a point of failure. So BitPay was great, but BitPay is not even taking new merchants. And so we need a decentralized open source point of sale system that takes multiple assets. And one thing I'm working on now is the idea of a gold-backed privacy stablecoin, where you're a merchant, you could take multiple cryptos, and then you could have that behind the scenes exchange out to a gold-backed privacy coin that you can actually redeem for physical metals. So something like that empowers small businesses who are actually dealing with the fact that the dollar's lost 25% of its purchasing power since COVID. So the dollar's not stable, but it is hard to sell a retailer on the volatility of cryptocurrency.
Yes.
And in particular, if their only way of using it is if they use an exchange and exit out to fiat. So I think there's some things that can be done. So a really good and easy to use point of sale system alongside a wallet, that actually can be what facilitates peer-to-peer digital commerce, and in a way that protects privacy. So I think that's what we need to do.
One of the things that that also came up was I think one of the ideas, the early ideas was tokenized gold, right? And I guess what happened with Venezuela and their gold reserves kind of woke me up, like, hey, Venezuela had gold reserves and unfortunately decided to keep them in London. And when they tried to access their reserves, they were like, nope, you're a tyrannical government. You can't get access to it. I mean, whether we agree whether it's a tyranny or not, it just seemed wrong in principle to say a country can't access its money just because we don't like its leader, right? And I guess I think one of the problems, well, I guess you're working on it, but I just want to know with gold, there's always going to be a physical location that the government authorities and want to say, I don't like what you're doing, is I seize it, right? I mean, look at how the dollar lost its gold backing and it made gold illegal or something like that, right? So I just wanted your thoughts on that, right?
Well, so my thoughts on that are one, it has to be decentralized. So you can't be in one location. You have to be in multiple locations. And so there's always risk. But
Mm.
actually, I take a slightly different look, which is that one, every fiat currency in human history has failed. Every single
Yes.
one has a 0% success rate, and including when gold and silver is used, because the government will debase the physical metals. And
Yeah.
so we have to separate money and state. State and money has never worked together as a combination, whether it is fiat or whether it is backed by precious metals. So
Yeah.
one way to do this is to figure out how to, and this is the part of the complexity in this is how to add as many decentralized, vaults as possible, while maintaining auditability and all
Redeemability.
of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's an easy problem, but it is a problem that can be, you can try it, and there's certain risks associated with it. But if you have vaults in 15 different countries, and then you could even go so far as to start adding pawn shops and everything else, depending on how sophisticated you get, you could end up
Yeah.
having thousands of different places. And so it still ends up being sounder money than we've ever had in human history. It may not be as perfect as we want. My goal with this is for it to be one-to-one backed. I mean, complete, no fractional reserve at all. The only way it becomes a fractional reserve system is if a government comes in and says, okay, yeah, you have some gold in London, you can't use that anymore. Okay, now it's 90% back. That's still better than anything else out there, right? But I like that kind of approach. But everything has risk. That everybody's got to get comfortable with the fact that there is no solution that is without risk. And everything, even with privacy coins, I mean, there's going to be a constant arms race. The thing
Yeah.
that I like about the privacy space as compared to Bitcoin is that there's innovation going on.
Yes. Yeah.
And people say to me, well, what if they figure that out? Well, this is why these
Yeah.
different projects are
Correct.
competing. This is why you should use multiple privacy coins,
Correct.
because if they figure one out, well, okay, good. Well, then we're going to be using another, and we just have to be vigilant about the fact that if we think there is going to be a single global currency to rule them all.
Yeah.
I don't even know why we think that. I don't even know why libertarian people think that's a good idea. Somehow,
No.
like, there's a whole bunch of disconnects that have happened. But I not only do I think it's not possible, but I don't even think it's desirable. There should
Yeah.
always be change, and there should always be innovation, and so we should embrace that. The other side wants one digital currency, and that's, I don't think we want technocracy. Or at least I know I don't, and I think most people, if they understood it, wouldn't want it either.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's like I guess that's one of the unfortunate things that even within the privacy community, like there's so much infighting and bashing. Like like the Monero Maxis, like why would you bother with any other privacy shitcoin and stuff like that? And I find that's very unfortunate because they are the poster child of privacy coins, and they're kind of like sometimes when people accept Bitcoin, they don't accept Monero. Like, oh, why do you call us a shitcoin? We're better than Bitcoin. And then like they feel upset, why the Bitcoin maxis. But they are doing the well, not all of them, of course. There are a lot of really good people in Monero that are level-headed and they are like embrace a lot of things. But the really really vocal ones obviously tend to be more of like, yeah, we're the best. There's no one else. We're decentralized and all of that. Why use any other privacy coin? And I find like those arguments are the exact same arguments that they hate from the Bitcoiners, right? So I mean, I truly believe that it's good. Like Zano are great friends with us. I've met the people and like we are direct competitors. If you take a look at our feature set, what we're doing, we have different approaches, but that's what's good because if something fails, there's something to go on. There's distinguishing, and we can actually work together. So I really kind of believe that. I know that was a bit off tangent, but
Well,
yeah.
I think you're bringing up a really good point. Now, are you going to Monerotopia by any chance next month?
I went to the last one, but it's like a 38-hour flight. So I was like, this time around, I mean, we're supporting Monerotopia. We're actually, I think, in the semifinals for Copa Monero.
Okay.
So hopefully we can win. But yeah, I do think I have an online talk. I haven't figured out what I want to talk yet, but I'll be there virtually. But are you going to be there? I think it's going to be a great time.
Yeah, I'm going to be there speaking, and in fact, I want to put together a panel as well to actually talk about what you just mentioned, because I actually see the privacy community starting to come together. And I
Yes.
wasn't in it as much before. I ended up in this thread with the Zuko from Zcash,
Zcash.
and the Monero people. I'm like, I just posed this question. I'm like, what's the deal with the back and forth on that? And then I certainly got a long thread full. And it sounds like a lot of that is in the past. There was some really bad behavior in the past, and which was, like putting out potential hits on people. Like, it was
Yeah,
weird
yeah,
stuff. But
yeah.
I think that's gone away. And one of the things that I want to talk about at Monerotopia is how we can all work together to market privacy, because um, I put this in my my workshop. 35% or 33% of Gen Z in America are okay with the federal government installing surveillance cameras to monitor for domestic violence. So we have a generational issue. I mean, for me, I've always just assumed privacy was just a fundamental right. I've
Yeah,
never questioned it not being a fundamental right. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you find out that there are entire generations of people that never even thought to value it, don't even understand it. And we know what the government is doing, and we know what everybody else is doing from a propaganda perspective, which is, oh, if you use a privacy coin, you are guilty by default. We have somehow
yeah,
gotten into this mode. I was in this lawsuit, and I won't go into that, but it was like 5.5 years. And if you use Signal, or if you use something that has disappearing messages, then you're almost assumed guilty by default. It's
yeah.
almost like you're
There's
deleting
something to
evidence.
hide.
And I'm like, wait a minute. Why would I assume, first of all, that I need to keep electronic records of everything that I do for a potential discovery in the future? But this is how it has shifted. And I don't know whether it was from George W. Bush saying, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, whatever. I don't know
You
when
know,
this.
you know who said that? It was Joseph Goebbels from the Nazi Party.
Well, he started it, and apparently now modern American politicians are picking it up like it's a good
Yeah,
idea. So we need to, and by the way, this works now to a certain degree, because you have Operation Choke Point, and you have all these different industries. So people in the health freedom area, food freedom area, Second Amendment area that have already been targeted. We need to explain to people that you may look at this as something that's for the black market right now, but everything everybody does is going to become black market. What is
yeah,
going to become the allowed marketplace for buying things is going to be prescribed from the top down, and the overwhelming majority of people will not like it. And so I want to work to see if we can work together as a group to really push this, and push privacy, and figure out a way to get that out there as something that everybody should understand, should be a right. And if they don't understand it, put it in terms that they will understand, because it will, absolutely affect everyone. So
yeah. So Vlad Costia, I don't know if you heard of him. He's actually building doing a privacy magazine, and I made a submission is about this exact thing, about we should move past privacy coin tribalism, and there are ways that there are meaningful interactions that we can do together, even if we are competitors. I mean, I'll send you the article maybe after this call. But yeah, so I think we're hitting the 1 hour mark. But I guess I wanted to give like a huge shout out to Roger, and like what he's facing. Roger, is a seed investor of Firo, and he's also like a big supporter of Xano right now. And I know he's a personal friend of yours. I know you wanted to do like a shout out of like the enemies of the state bash or whatever. And yeah, please, I'll just let you go there, because it's very unfortunate what has happened to him, and it almost feels like a witch hunt, right? Because after all these years, why? I don't know, maybe I'm a bit of like tinfoil hat, but like, why after releasing that book you decide to go to such lengths over what is a very, to me, isn't a really big deal,
well, I'm working on a website now, and possibly a petition as well.
Yeah,
The DOJ needs to stop their witch hunt, and Roger needs to get a pardon. And I will tell you, everybody needs to worry about what's going on with Roger. And
yeah.
so I'm going to be making a lot of noise to elevate this about his case, because no one's doing this or advocating for it in the United States. And in part, I mean, I talked to a lot of people and like, I forgot about that, or I didn't know what's going on. And so this should be on everybody's radar because it affects everyone in crypto.
Yeah.
So even if you don't like the block size wars or whatever, it doesn't matter. You are not going to like what they're doing to Roger, how they're doing it, and what the implications are of it. And so what's happened with Roger is this has been an ongoing tax thing, but Roger renounced his citizenship officially in 2014, but he was already living in Japan years and years and years before that. Like, he had decided after a previous encounter with the federal government where he had to spend time in prison that in 2001, like, all right, I'm out of here. And so he actually paid taxes in 2014 because you're supposed to pay a 25% exit tax when you leave the country. Which, by the way, now let's put this in perspective. In 2014, Mt. Gox had collapsed. Yeah. At that point, people thought crypto was kind of a joke in 2014. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know what the status of Bitcoin was. Is it a currency? Is it an asset? Like, nothing was known about this. So Roger pays lawyers and accounting firms and everything else, does all this analysis, figures out an amount, pays a large amount of money, leaves. And that was a decade ago. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, I mean, this case didn't just come about. This case has been going on for a long time, but they went after him. And there are some interesting things about his case. And I'm going to do a whole podcast on this where I'm going to lay out all of the evidence on this because it's horrifying. They breached his attorney-client privilege. They basically said, well, some of the conversations you were having with your attorney aren't related to legal things. So we're going to actually look at your communications with your lawyer. And so they've been like harassing his lawyers in this case. He actually appealed that all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court decided not to take the case up on this issue, looking into this. And so just consider, no one was paying taxes on this. I think after since then, the IRS went back retroactively and to 70,000 people saying, hey, you owe taxes for this. At no point have they said to Roger, hey, here's how much you owe. Like, he hasn't been given here's the difference between what you should have paid and now what you owe. He's been given no opportunity to pay anything. Yeah. And then they arrest him, a few weeks after he writes this Hijacking Bitcoin book, I think in Spain, the same place where John McAfee died in prison. And if you look at John McAfee's case, John was in the same prison that Roger was in. He's at least out on bail now. But McAfee was in this prison for 8 months and then died one day after exhausting his last appeal fighting extradition. Well, Roger's been there for 5 months. Yeah. Right? 5 months. And so here's what happens if they win this case. It means that if you innovate and you invest in something where the tax rules are completely unclear and you think you do the right thing, you'll be punished for it a decade later. It means that anybody that invested in Bitcoin, hey, I hope you all now realize it is a public ledger. So I hope you all pay taxes on everything that you've ever done with Bitcoin, going all the way back to the very beginning of Bitcoin, because they are tracing it and they'll go after it retroactively, even though there wasn't any ruling on what the tax situation was. So you can all prepare for that. And it's an embarrassment for the United States. I don't see how any of these politicians can go out and say they're for Bitcoin and for crypto and for innovation, and then target the guy, Bitcoin Jesus, who without Roger, none of this would be where it is.
Exactly.
Hands down. And whether you agree with the current state of it, I 100% agree with him ideologically and on all of it. But even if you don't agree with him, you have to admit that it wouldn't be here in this way and at this scale if it weren't for Roger. And so to target the guy that has been promoting voluntary interaction and has been opposed to war, and to do it in this manner is it's horrifying to me. And I actually, everywhere I go, I've included Roger's situation, and I promote Hijacking Bitcoin. People need to read Hijacking Bitcoin, but then once I put this website out and everything else, we need to spread this information because people need to understand what's going on with this case, because it affects every single person in crypto, and it affects the competitive position of the United States. So anybody that thinks the United States is going to be anything in crypto. That's not going to be the case if this travesty is allowed to continue. So that's I did want to say that about Roger. So
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, even beyond him, I mean, like, yeah, Roger's case is really bad, and this is especially even now privacy coin developers. I don't know if you've been following what happened to the Tornado Cash guys, right? Even the Samurai Wallet guys, and then like local Monero shut down, and all these other things are just like they're also scared. We all, I mean, like, we can believe what we want, but very few of us actually want to go to jail, and you don't blame people for that. People have families, people have livelihoods, and and that's why it's just like, yeah, what's happening to Roger. I'm surprised that more people aren't talking about it. Everyone's like, good for him, he's against Bitcoin, and I'm like, come on, he was one of the like biggest supporters of Bitcoin that really pushed it where it is. Obviously he's not the actual Jesus. He's a human being. He may have some views, he may have done some mistakes, but that shouldn't take away from all the contribution that he has done, and especially, like, how much he's actually done for the crypto industry. Like, I think there's very few people in the sense of like evangelical talking about this, doing it in, I would say, an honest way. Roger Ver to me is someone that I will always respect, regardless what happens. And yeah, so yeah.
well, I play a video clip in my talk, and it was the first time I ever met Roger. It was actually his talk from Liberty Forum in 2012. And he talks about why he's so excited about Bitcoin and about, peer-to-peer cash, helping everybody all over the world, ending the wars, all of this other stuff. And then there's a clip from Michael Saylor where Michael Saylor says, we don't want to compete with the dollar or the euro. That would be inflammatory. We don't want to compete with Visa or MasterCard. We want to comply with KYC, AML. We want to comply with taxes. And that clip is about all I need to say. And people are shocked when they actually see the comparison, where I say Roger was the standard bearer for what Bitcoin was supposed to be about from this early time period. And now this is Michael Saylor. And now when you look at that in the context of CBDCs coming down the line, Roger has been completely consistent with why cryptocurrency is important and why it is important to separate money and state from the perspective of promoting freedom and stopping violence. And he's invested in an experiment with a variety of different things, which is also, again, this search for maximalism doesn't even make sense from a liberty perspective. So he's invested in a lot of different things, and I know he's very passionate about privacy coins. And so I think if people would look into this and read Hijacking Bitcoin and then look at what Roger's interested in now, it makes perfect sense, and people should at least do research on what Roger's saying and promoting, because it is the path forward. But now it's critically important. When Bitcoin launched, it was okay. Yes, it was after the 2008 financial collapse. And certainly people understood why the financial system was bad. But now with CBDCs, this isn't a nice to have. This is absolutely critical. If we don't have this, then we literally will be dealing with global tyranny. There isn't any place on this planet that will be safe from this complete digital tyranny and surveillance through CBDCs. So anyway, that's my few minutes on that.
I saw that you also have a page for Roger, free Roger at .daylightfreedom.org. I saw you have like a donate in crypto via now payments. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
No. Don't donate to that. That was for an event that we did in DC a long time ago. And I will say, I want to kind of I want Roger to be pardoned. So I don't, also in doing this, I don't want to do anything that would jeopardize his chances or in any way keep him. So I did that when he was still in prison. I actually thought his life was at risk, to be honest. So at that point in time, that was it. Now, and I will say this either this week or next week, depending on the timing of the website. The important thing is to get out the factual information about his case. Like, even though, and this is even hard for me because I'm as anti-state as you can get, but this is not about taxation, is theft, and all these other things. It's about explaining the actual facts of what's going on to Roger and what the implications are. And then, if anything, sharing the positive aspects about Roger and the impact that he's had on freedom. From a loving position, as opposed to a tear down the state type of approach. Because I think the goal at this point is to do everything that we can to get to make sure he doesn't actually end up in prison and actually can get a pardon. And I'd love to see him back at PorkFest and be able to travel back to the United States. And we need Roger now.
Yeah.
Think about how much more effective our movement would be if we had Roger's voice. We don't have Roger's voice, and that I feel the lack of having Roger's voice, which is exactly what they want. And the same is true with Ian Freeman. Ian Freeman is in federal prison for 8 years because he was effective. Roger learned about Bitcoin from Ian Freeman on Free Talk Live. And Ian has spread Bitcoin all over the place. When I talk about these stores and restaurants that take cryptocurrency in New Hampshire, a lot of that, most of it, is because of Ian going to these places and getting them to sign up. And he, worked on ATMs all throughout the state and all throughout New England. And now that he's gone and now that he's in federal prison, all of this has a chilling effect, and we can't let it have a chilling effect. We have to do the reverse. And to your point, some people I've talked to, they're like, well, they're afraid. Well, I don't want to necessarily say anything about this, or I don't want to mention anything about Roger because he's got issues with the DOJ. Well, I've got to tell you something. If you're not going to stand up for people that promote freedom because they're being targeted, then you already don't have freedom. Yeah. You're already in prison. So this is how serious this is. And so I'm hoping that we can build some momentum around this and get people to start sharing information and to help out with this.
Definitely. I think it kind of like reminds me about this poem about first they came, first they came for this, first they came and then there was no one else to stand for us. And I think going after Roger, especially over something like that, is a really, really like a huge warning shot that we should all care about. So, please keep us posted on that. We would like to get involved on that. And I guess there are two more things that I would like from this interview. I guess we're here to answer any, I know you did some reading about Firo. If you have any questions about Firo, and then after that, we have some questions from our community that we selected that they want to hear from you as well. So yeah.
Well, I'm interested in playing around with it. So I've got an Edge wallet. So I'm gonna.
Don't use Edge wallet because it doesn't support the privacy features. So use Stack Wallet or Campfire. I'll send you the links over, and that shows how all our privacy features work. We're trying to get those privacy features into Edge as well, but we actually did all the integration, and then Paul told us, "Oh, we just changed our architecture," and then we're like, "Oh, great!" And so it's not for a lack of trying. It's one of the pains that goes with developing your own privacy protocol.
Got it. Well, I will say, it'd be great if it were included in Cake Wallet.
Oh no, Vic did say that he will be adding Firo. I mean, obviously, if you know him, give him a shout, then he'll push it along. But Firo is definitely on Vic's radar as well. Yeah.
Okay, so because for me, I'm going to promote a whole basket of privacy coins, and when I do these workshops, so they're anywhere from 50 to 300 people in these workshops. And here's the thing, and this is an eye-opening experience. And I actually had one of the guys from Cake Wallet was in one of these in one of these workshops. Understand that only 5% of Americans have ever used cryptocurrency to buy something. Yeah. Right. And last month, I think it was like 0.2% or something. It's like it's actually dropping. But because of COVID, you have millions of people who have been radicalized. You have millions of people who are now questioning the government, and now because of inflation are now questioning the Federal Reserve. So a lot of these workshops that I do are boomers. These are people that actually have large amounts of money. Yeah. But they've never used cryptocurrency before. And so what I'm trying to do is give them a simple solution, but that focuses on privacy. So I'd love to see it involved with integrated with Cake Wallet, because and to me, that's what Cake Wallet is the easiest thing I've found to be able to use. I use it myself now on a day-to-day basis. And so I look forward to that. I'm curious about the tokenization. You mentioned you guys are also doing tokenization. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah. So just a quick one, because Stack Wallet is actually a fork of Cake with Cake's knowledge, and Stack also contributes back to Cake. So it's kind of like a working together solution. So that's how also Firo is also going in. So hopefully, fingers crossed there. But if you like Cake Wallet, you probably would like Stack Wallet as well. They just support maybe different assets as well. Back to the Spark assets layer, obviously, it's very similar to Xano's confidential layer, except that we use our own Lelantus Spark technology, which has much greater anonymity sets than the current ring CT technology, which the anonymity sets around like 16 or so. This one's in 30, 40,000 or so. And I wouldn't go too much into it, but we also support privacy NFTs. I know it sounds kind of silly, like, oh, why would I want to have a private NFTs? I think there is a use case there where I might want to have an NFT and show it off, but I don't want people to see, oh, it went through this hand to this hand to this hand to this hand, or like when I share an address, like we don't know who's actually holding an NFT unless I give you a view key for it. That's also one of the key things that we do. But I think one of the things is that both Xano is working with confidential layer. Firo is also going to be integrated with confidential layer as well. And it's great that both Xano and us, like, yeah, although we're competitors, we are like, we want the whole privacy ecosystem to grow, and we don't see it as a zero-sum game between both of us. So we have different approaches, like a totally different cryptographic base. And I think one of the cool things about Firo is that when you make a transaction, even before the block confirmation, like as you say, I think in one of the other interviews, you say like the tools of tyranny is going to be so freaking convenient. And that's one of the biggest battles that we have, because Bitcoin is not that convenient. Cryptocurrencies, the wait for the confirmations and stuff is quite crap, right? Like, let's face it.
Yep.
And with our technology, the transaction is final within a couple of seconds, even before the block confirmation happens. And also blocks are final within a few seconds after they're confirmed. So there's no like worry about, oh, I need to wait 6 confirmation, or there's some sort of reordering. So we have those sort of technology to make it good for like face-to-face transactions and usability, because as you said, it has to be convenient, it has to be usable to compete with these tyranny systems. So yeah, I wouldn't talk too much about Firo. We can, I can share more materials after the call. I just wanted to like answer any of the questions that you had that were burning.
All right. Well, I have my Stack wallet now, so
Yeah.
I'm ready to go, ready to start playing around with it. And look, this confidential layer thing I think is phenomenal. I think it's a game changer, and
Yeah.
I think the fact that you're in there along with Xano, I think that's going to be. I've started to talk to people about that. I mean, the ability to take your existing coins and make them private is a huge win. So I'm glad to see that you guys are a part of that, and I'm sure I'll be using it. And as I play around with it as well. Again, once it gets into Cake Wallet, I mean, it'll be part of my solution. So
Definitely.
my whole approach, and as I said on my website, I list what I'm using on a day-to-day basis, but it changes. And
Yep.
my screen is, at this point, if it's not privacy, it's not in there, because that's not an effective solution. So I look forward to exploring it further.
Yeah, the cool thing is that I noticed Dash is also in your thing, and Dash privacy is like this coin join thing, but they were actually in talks with us to use our technology to be integrated in Dash. So there are ways that we can all work together. So that's quite cool. So yeah, I guess we will move now to the community questions. I want to be respectful of your time. We're almost hitting the 1.5 hour mark, so I will keep it brief. But I really appreciate the time that you made for this. So I guess one of the things, so this guy, his name is, oh gosh, I'm going to slaughter his name, Koni Baje Baba. And he says, as technology evolves, how do you envision the future of decentralized privacy solutions like Firo contributing to a broader movement for digital freedom? I guess you touched a bit on that, but maybe I guess you can give a short, brief answer for that. Yeah.
I mean, again, I think the tools are going to get easier to use. I think wallets, and I can see a future where wallets and point of sale systems have things like confidential layer built in, but you don't even know you're using it,
Yeah.
where it's built into the wallet where you're going to be able to swap. And I think that's actually going to be the key to this, is going to be user-friendly tools that behind the scenes, there's all kinds of amazing and complex things going on, but for the user, it's just going to be the click of a mouse button. And I actually can see that. I believe that'll happen in the next 6 months.
Mm.
So I actually think that, well, 6 months to 12 months. I think by the end of next year, we will have point of sale systems and wallets that will be able to swap in and out of different privacy coins that are
Yeah.
easy to use and that don't require a lot of multiple services. They'll be able to be done within very user friendly and easy to use services. So I think that's happening. It's being built. I mean, it's just literally a matter of time. So I'm actually optimistic about that, and I'm hopeful that Moneratopia is. I'm actually excited about Moneratopia because I sense that there is some harmony starting to develop about the need to promote privacy. So I actually think if we collaborate together, we're going to have a situation where people will be just using multiple privacy coins and interchanging them. Because, by the way, it will be necessary. If the US CBDC alone can do 1.8 million transactions per second, this
Yeah.
is why I say to everybody, you need multiple coins. There is no privacy coin that can do 1.8 million transactions per
Yeah.
second or even
Yeah.
close. So we're
Yeah.
absolutely going to need multiple of these coins. So I think that's great. And so let's keep the innovation going, and hope people continue to start working together more.
Okay, so next question from Akami. He says, with increasing regulatory scrutiny on privacy coins, what are your thoughts on the balance between ensuring privacy and compliance with legal frameworks?
Well, when you understand that the legal frameworks are designed to have complete and total technocratic control over all aspects of our lives, I'm less concerned moving forward about compliance. I mean, right now, I don't think I'm not complying with anything, but I mean, there's going to become a point in time where you can't comply your way out of tyranny.
Yes,
So
agree.
this is ultimately the race. So for right now, it's, yeah, we're not doing anything illegal, but expect, based on the legislation, that they're probably going to try to ban these things. And I will say this: what I mean, my hope for, not that I have any influence over it, is the worst thing that we can have is all Republicans or all Democrats. It doesn't even matter which party's in control. We really, from a privacy perspective, we need gridlock. We need like the worst possible gridlock. That's the only way. And if we had enough gridlock, then actually it's conceivable that nothing happens on the privacy front. Although I think that a terror attack or a cyber attack or something else, and they'll all unify around terrorism and money laundering and all the stuff that they make up that is actually a fiat problem. And
Yeah.
but in any, that's what we can hope for. But I encourage people to, again, and I mentioned this earlier, get into privacy coins. And I would recommend, if you have to use a centralized exchange, like don't buy Monero directly, or don't buy any privacy coin. Should they even be available on a centralized exchange, buy something else and then exchange it. And so that's your best bet.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Okay, we have, I guess, two more questions. From user Dija, who says, "What do you think are the key barriers for mainstream adoption of privacy coins, in general? What do you think are the key barriers?"
So the big barriers are, one, there's market perception. So there is the fact that, and they're good at it. The government's good
Yeah.
at painting it that if you're using these things, you must be a criminal by default. So there's the perception, which I think we can address by all working together and putting out some viral content that explains that, it's like you said, first they came for, first they came for Roger, then they came for this. First they came for, the retail gun stores. First they came for, all of these other categories of businesses, and then they're going to come for you next. I think if we do an effective job, we can combat that. And then the other issue is simply usability.
Yeah.
And complexity. And I mean, I always say this, it's like, okay, and it actually got a pretty good laugh at this last workshop, but most of crypto is honestly 20-year-old guys developing stuff for 20-year-old guys. And we have to throw some UI into this, and
Yep.
we have to understand. So these CBDCs, they're making this so that everybody can use it, no matter what, if you're visually impaired, whether you even have access to the internet, like to the level of, even if you think about this, welfare, they have, they hand out welfare now in the United States using EBT cards, which are Visa branded debit cards. They they can do the same thing with CBDCs. They can issue touch by pay cards. So you won't have to have a wallet per se, or even an internet connection to spend CBDCs in the future. So we have to be thinking about, how do we really make this easy? But I think things like Cake Wallet, integrating multiple, Cake Wallet is pretty easy to use.
Yeah.
I think I think once you get into multiple wallets, it actually becomes problematic. I just did a workshop where people downloaded a Xano wallet and then a Cake wallet. And
Yeah.
actually, you'd be amazed just going through this process of, and they're pretty easy to use wallets, but people are like, oh, I have to cut and paste this here. And what's this address mean? And what are these seed words? Like, for the 95% of people who've never bought anything with crypto, that stuff is actually still foreign. And it's intuitive for us because we've been dealing with this stuff for a decade. So making that more user friendly. And then the most important thing for adoption, hands down, is we have to have a point of sale system that is multi-asset, that includes privacy coins, because that is the number one bottleneck. Because you can give people wallets with privacy coins, but what are they going to do with them?
Yeah, it has to be built into their system that they're using every day, not a separate workflow, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So all of and by the way, everything that I've just described is completely doable. There's nothing. This isn't like, the hardest part was the architecture and all of the stuff that goes on to create the stable coins. The UI stuff is actually is easier by comparison, but there just hasn't been the focus on that. And we need to decide that privacy coins aren't this niche cool thing for me and my friends in my community. Privacy coins are for everybody. And I think once we make that, if we actually make that shift, then we'll actually change the way that the user interface works.
Makes sense. Okay, final question from Marvelous, who's asked, what are some of your favorite marketplaces and sites to buy and sell goods and services using privacy coins, if any?
There's the new Monero Bazaar that I've played around with a little bit, and there's something similar being created for Xano. But for the most part, I'm actually waiting. There are some integrations being done. I'm looking forward to Now Payments integrating Xano. That's actually going to be kind of a game changer. The truth is,
Now Payments support Firo, so you can do it today.
Okay. Good. Then I will take a look at that and integrate that. In fact, I'm going to. On my own site, I'm updating my book. Then the next is, don't buy my book right now because the crypto section is embarrassing, but I'm going to make it available for direct sale, and I'm going to take privacy coins, and I'm waiting for the Now Payments, component to do that. I'm also potentially building a point of sale system, forking an existing thing that existed. And so that's, but I've done, most transactions I've done have been P2P.
Yeah.
And part of it is, it's not like the communities aren't so large that, after a while you actually get to know people. Even when I was using Ravencoin, Ravencoin still isn't available on a marketplace anywhere, but I bought and sold stuff all over the world, and miraculously was never rugged. I certainly, there was always risk that could happen, but there's Xano even has a P2P exchange. So I actually sold a gold back using that. And so that's kind of where I've been so far. And I look forward to seeing how the marketplaces develop.
That's cool. Cool. Yeah, that's all the questions we have from our community. Thanks for answering them. I guess, this is a good time to wrap up. Really thank you for staying more than a lot of times, like we're hitting the 1.5 hour mark. Do you have any kind of like final thoughts for our listeners? And how can we follow you? And also what the Daylight Freedom Foundation does. Yeah.
Sure. You can follow me. The best place to follow me is on X. I'm at Aaron R. Day. Although my account's heavily shadow banned again, but it is what it is. They don't like this CBDC topic or the Federal Reserve. I guess maybe I should stop trolling the Federal Reserve and the Bank for International Settlement, but it is what it is. But that's the best place to find me. DaylightFreedom.org is a nonprofit my wife and I started, and it's more generic about promoting decentralization, free will, love, and abundance, kind of the opposite of the technocracy, which is all about authoritarianism and manufactured scarcity and fear. And so it started out with a broader mission, but where it's ended up so far and right now, it's about promoting uh, peer-to-peer digital cash and privacy coins and gold and silver as an alternative, with the understanding that the CBDCs are the biggest threat. So what we're going to find at the Daylight Freedom site is information about the workshops that we're doing all over the country and now expanding somewhat internationally. You'll find all my interviews, links to my articles from the Brownstone Institute. So that's pretty much what's there now, but it will be expanding over time. I'm actually really interested in the idea of network states. I think that, so to me, there's this could be, I'll try to make this as short as I can, but the idea here is we're moving towards complete centralization on the one hand. And so what is the alternative to that? And, being in the US and having spent a lot of time on politics, we're not going to fix the US. In fact, I saw this really interesting image yesterday that shows that, empires die, nation states like this, there is no turnaround. And a lot of people become attached to whatever their nation state is, but when you let go of that attachment, it frees up energy to work on new things. So I suspect we'll be working more on also network states, but also kind of sharing ideas and information so that the network states that are created are, for instance, not based on communism. There's been a complete lack of, there's nowhere to go for truth. Even when you're debating where do you go to debate first principles now? Where do you go to get information about first principles? And so I see Daylight Freedom Foundation going into that area as well. But for the immediate future, we're focusing on this, stopping CBDCs and working on an alternative.
Great. Thank you so much, Aaron. And yeah, so I guess like this is the end of the interview. Thanks so much for watching. You can follow Aaron on his X and also give him a follow on his website. So thank you very much, guys.